gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker, who was, as Nerik said, there at the very beginning in conceptualizing CALD and making CALD happen. In fact, he was an author of the CALD Charter, and he has been with us for most of the journey of CALD's past 20 years. And you will see his presence in many of the photos, but we also have felt his presence in the spirit of CALD throughout our journey of promoting democracy and liberalism in Asia. Now today he joins us after a very difficult day of being in government and shouldering the heavy responsibilities of governing, especially during a time of many challenges in this country. So we're very honored and pleased to have him here with us tonight, Secretary of Budget and Management of the Philippines and the former president of the Liberal Party, as well as the former chair of CALD, the Honorable Butch Abad.
Thank you, Nerik. Thank you, Bikim. Rainsy, if I were allowed to vote today, I'll vote for you now after that rousing speech that you did. Ladies and gentlemen, especially to our liberal partners from Asia, I'm happy to see some of them I've not seen for a long time. Sun Juan is finally out of Singapore. Mr. Chee Soon-Juan has the distinction of having been chairman of CALD, but to never preside over any of its meetings because of the fact that he was practically in jail the whole time that he was chair of CALD. And we are really elated to see Dr. Chee Soon-Juan joining us this evening. Let me also recognize, of course, our chairman. We are really happy with the developments in Cambodia, especially after that last parliamentary elections. You're getting there, Rainsy, and don't forget us. Don't you forget us. Also, our partners from Europe and the other countries like the US, in the community of democracies. Of course, Graham Watson's here. Certainly, we welcome you all here in Manila. My colleagues from the Liberal Party, our former president for a long time, Congressman Raul Dasa. Yeah. And I have some of my colleagues in the cabinet are here. Secretary Manny Mamba is over there. And friends of the Liberal Party and Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Good evening. Sometime in the early 90s, a handful of Asian participants in the Liberal International Conference in Sintra, Portugal, decided to come together and wind down over bottles of beer. You know, I can still distinctly remember the location of our meeting because it was a beautiful castle right at the outskirts of Sintra. It was not even in the town center. In fact, Wolfgang and I and Meising In fact, the Thai MP who was there was Alongkorn Ponlabut. And Macy was with a young Taiwanese intern named Renata Chen, if I recall correctly. And we were the very few Asian contingent amidst a very noisy South American and African group. And reserve as we were as Asians, we were kind of overwhelmed by the very Eurocentric discussions that were happening there. So one night we decided to walk about the long stretch of, I think we over the hill, Wolfgang, to go to the pub at the center of Sintra and talk about other things other than what was being discussed by the South Americans and the Africans. And we were asking Dr. Saxon-Ruder, there has to be a forum where we Asians can also speak out and express also our aspirations and dreams about liberalism and democracy in Asia. And I think that was really the whole point of that meeting over beer. In fact, I was the one at the back of a paper napkin trying to figure out a concept that we can sell to the Frederick Naumann Foundation, which eventually, as was earlier mentioned, blossomed into what we are gathered here for tonight. I remembered how out of place we were in that conference. We could not relate to the very continental topics dominating the discussions there. We were disappointed that Asian issues were not being discussed. And after the alcohol had already liberated our thoughts and feelings, the idea to form CALD came into being. Later on, I think in December of 1993, after an initial brainstorm in Taipei, CALD was officially inaugurated in Bangkok, Thailand. And today, after 20 years, CALD has become a crucial element in the global struggle for liberalism and democracy. And I think for that, we deserve a big round of applause. CALD is close to my heart as its formation coincided with critical junctures in my own personal political career. When I was in Lisbon, I was still licking my wounds from a quote-unquote political defeat. Stepping down as Secretary of Agrarian Reform under the administration of the late, our icon of democracy, former President Cory Aquino, after serving for a record of only 3 months. In 1990, I accepted President Aquino's offer to serve in her cabinet, which is a great distinction, even if I had to pay the price of giving up my congressional seat. I wholeheartedly accepted the challenge because it was indeed an opportunity to manage what the President then called the centerpiece of her economic recovery program, which is the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, which I had the honor of sponsoring when I was a neophyte congressman after the dismantling of the Marcos martial rule. At the time when the first Aquino government, built after the People Power Revolution of 1986, toppled the Marcos dictatorship, it was deeply under threat by military adventurism, as well as the dominant of vested interests who were able to re-entrench themselves in our political life. In fact, I was asked to join the first Aquino cabinet after the 8th coup attempt, which was the bloodiest and which almost brought our fledgling democracy down. It was also the coup attempt where our current president, the son of Ninoy and Cory Aquino, Noynoy Aquino, was almost killed when he was met by a hail of bullets as he was trying to join his mother in the besieged palace of Malacanang. In fact, until today, President Aquino still carries some of the bullet fragments in his neck, as his doctors had been very reluctant to touch his nerves close to his heart. I took on the agrarian reform portfolio, fully aware of the powerful landlord interests which were against the success of the program. Such interests included my own former colleagues in Congress who rejected my appointment a record 7 times. And after 3 months and 7 rejections by the powerful Commission on Appointments, I decided to pack up and thought that Sintra was a better option. A few months after that, I found myself in that conference, and the rest is really, as they say, history. I had learned as an activist during the years of martial rule to never back out of great opportunities, to never give up even after falling so hard, to consider acts of stupidity in the eyes of traditionalists as acts of heroism. Perhaps after having been rejuvenated by our sojourn in Portugal, I went back home to face another difficult yet important juncture in my political life. That was our first democratic presidential elections in 1992. I ran for the Senate, for some of those who have forgotten, because it was really a forgettable attempt. Not as part of any major political coalition at that time, but as a candidate of the Liberal Party coalition. I supported the presidential campaign of then Senator Jovito Salonga, the candidate that activists like me had gravitated towards due to his integrity as a politician, his heroism during martial law, and his leadership in rejecting the renewal of the basis treaty in the Philippines. And finally, after about 400 years, dismantling foreign military bases in our country. The Liberal Party at that time was considered, the way we were teased before, a Volkswagen party. You know, the Beetle, not the van. Because they were saying that we were so few, we could fit in a Volkswagen Beetle. Still, we pegged our hopes on the support given by the civil society movement and other fellow activists in the anti-martial law struggle. But sadly, we did not have the 3 Gs of Philippine politics then: guns, goons, and most especially, the gold. And so, miserably, we lost that election. The Liberal Party could have just closed shop after that massive defeat. I could have quit mainstream politics and just remain in the sidelines. But I held firmly into my advocacy for a new kind of politics and critical issues against corruption, inequity, and social conflicts, problems that today we continue to face. And in my belief in the free and democratic way of life that we all aspire for. Today I'm here. I'm still here in perhaps the most important point of my political career, during yet another critical juncture in our country's democratic history. All of us in this room, I believe, have faced gargantuan challenges in our fight for democracy in our respective countries. Numerous defeats in the face of those who stood against authoritarianism, and even questions as to whether the liberal ideology is appropriate for Asia. But despite incarceration, humiliation, and our own, once in a while, self-doubt, we prevailed and we are still here, fighting for liberalism and democracy. This is the beauty of the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. It is the tapestry of our collective struggles to establish democracy and to make it work in our respective countries. It is the hallmark of our belief that the free and democratic way of life is the Asian way of life. You know, last month, I was invited by the president of Myanmar. And you know what we did? We launched the Open Government Partnership in Myanmar. And a very remarkable, I couldn't believe that I was addressing the hierarchy of the Myanmar government, talking about open government. The story of CALD is our ongoing story of our defeat and victory, of incarceration and liberation, of oppression and empowerment. It is the story of our dear friend, Sam Rainsy. Sometimes he keeps running around and running away, but I think now he will be there, adding to the 55 seats that they got in the parliament, Myanmar. Our current chairman, who after being in self-exile from facing politically motivated charges, has now been pardoned by the king and allowed to return to Cambodia. We're happy for that, Rainsy. It is the story of Dr. Chee Soon-juan, who has recently been discharged from bankruptcy. When were you ever not in bankruptcy? And now able to contest the upcoming general elections in Singapore in 2016. Good luck. Of course, it's the story of Aung San Suu Kyi, who is now in the Burmese parliament after the military regime opened the doors for the process of democratization. The story of CALD is likewise the ongoing story of the Liberal Party in the Philippines, which has risen from relative obscurity as a Volkswagen party now to national prominence with the election of President Noynoy Aquino in 2010 due to his platform of anti-corruption and poverty reduction. Ours is an ongoing struggle against vested interests which have benefited from corruption and patronage deeply entrenched in our political life. It is our ongoing story of making democracy work and meaningful for our citizens. In 3 years, to the credit of President Aquino, before we came in, we were called the sick man of Asia. But in 3 years, now we are, together with China, the fastest growing economy in the region. Today, as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of CALD, and as we envision our next 20 years, let us recall our individual and collective stories and reflect upon the values that enabled us to persevere in our struggle for democracy. Tonight, I look forward to hearing your own stories of struggle and success in your respective countries, for it is something that will inform my own ongoing journey as a leader and as a liberal. As I end this speech, allow me to recall the most unfree period of my life, the 2 decades of the Marcos dictatorship, when I was imprisoned twice in 1978, after I took part in protests against the electoral fraud. And we campaigned for Ninoy Aquino, who was in jail and could not leave jail and campaign for himself. And second, in 1980, when I was charged with, quote-unquote, conspiring to assassinate President Ferdinand Marcos. I'm sorry we failed, but when we got wind of the news that I was to be captured, my wife and I, Dina, tried to elude arrest. And for days and months, we were running away, moving from one town to another, seeking refuge from relatives and friends. But finally, the Marcos regime caught us. At the time, Dina was pregnant with our first daughter, Julia. My greatest fear at that time was that she would be born behind bars, that she would be raised apart from us, or even without us, if ever we got killed by the regime, and that she will never know how it is to be free. With divine providence, perhaps, we were spared from our fears. We are alive up to today. Julia, too, eventually grew up to become an independent and courageous woman, and is now sitting in the cabinet with me as head of the presidential management staff. We were luckier than most other victims of martial rule, who were tortured and raped, who were incarcerated in military camps, or summarily executed. Among the victims of the regime were liberals like Evelio Javier, who was assassinated in broad daylight. And of course, our president's father, Ninoy Aquino, who after arriving from the US, was shot while coming down from the plane on the tarmac of what is now the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Perhaps it is the mysterious work of a force greater than ourselves, the creator of our history, our greatest ally in the heavens, who is opposed by the dictatorship of man, has something greater in store for me and our nation. Who am I to allow myself to be disempowered by hardships and defeat, to turn down great opportunities to serve and lead as a liberal? Indeed, I am fortunate to be addressing you this evening, to have been a key part of the growth of CALD, the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats, and of our own Liberal Party, and to now serve under the liberal presidency of President Noynoy Aquino. And I believe I would not have been here in this moment today had I not met fellow Asian liberals in Sintra, Portugal, more than 20 years ago. That critical juncture in my personal history, which has irreversibly shaped my political career. For this, I remain in deep solidarity to the struggles of liberals and Democrats worldwide, especially here in our region in Asia. From those who are fighting to free their countries from authoritarian rule, to those whose democracies are under threat by corruption, populism, and patronage politics, rest assured, I and your fellow Filipino liberals are certainly on your side. Perhaps this is the challenge to us, all of us in the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats, and the continuing liberal struggle, the continuing but broadening liberal struggle in Asia. To never give up on our efforts to make the process of democratization work in our respective countries, to never surrender to the supposed hegemony of strong-handed rule in our region, to never waver in our belief that the human being, that the Asian person is born to be free. Thank you very much and good evening to everyone.